information age, that wasn't necessarily so easy.
It definitely wasn't as easy, but for a long time it's also been possible. Like, let's just say that you're 10 years old and, you love swords. You go and help a blacksmith so that you can, he may not let you do anything, but you can watch, you can observe, you can pay attention. Whereas if you're told, oh no, that's not a good profession, or that's not okay, or you have to do this, then you don't have the opportunity. And the education system that we have now, the real problem with it is not that there's not information available, it's that they're actually specifically telling you, if you don't learn this, then you're stupid.
Yeah.
If you don't learn this, you don't get this piece of paper, and if you don't get this piece of paper, you don't make any money, and you'll never be successful.
Right.
Let me just tell
That's
you,
the real problem.
I've unfortunately been in the education system for 9 years, and I have 3 pieces of paper, so I know all about what you're talking about. So you're speaking to the choir here.
Right.
Are we recording yet? Because I was going to say something about the video in regards to that issue.
So you watch the video,
Recording.
One of the most interesting things I got from the video, besides how awesome the video was just the guy, how he talked about going to architecture school for 5 years.
Right.
And felt like he couldn't build a house afterwards, and then, I mean, he could, but
it's too complicated,
But how then, with the Cobb house, you could actually, I mean, it did kind of blow my mind that it's possible to learn how to build a house in a week. And he's like, well, no, really, you can't. And I'm just like, really? Because, yeah, I would totally, I mean, I've considered going to architecture school, and, it's expensive, very time-consuming. I know architects. It just seems something that would take forever.
Yeah, it's a huge waste of time and money.
But I have this intrinsic desire to build my own house.
Good. Well, I mean, it's one of the greatest skills you can possibly have.
And the other thing is, recently I've spent, about a decade dedicated towards science, and now I'm to the part where I really want to kind of dedicate the rest of my life to art. So it's kind of very appealing to me to be able to do the same things at the same time. To actually,
right, they're both. It's art and science at the same time.
Basically, now your house is your sculpture.
But it's also your architect.
Yeah, your architecture and your sculpture. Right. I mean, I've got a rock collection. I could display my rock collection in my wall.
Oh, I know.
I've got all my books. I could build a bookshelf into the wall.
Yeah,
you can design it to be however you want it to be.
And I really like how you can basically add to it. I mean, we could almost get like one of those. Have you seen those metal storage container houses?
A shed.
You could almost get like one of those metal shipping containers.
Or just put cob.
Start with that. Put cob on top of it. Build out from it with cob. I mean, with the cob, it just seems so versatile. You could add onto or change your existing structure or make a new structure or whatever.
Yeah, it's a brilliant idea because you could start with something small. You can live in it while you're still building, and you just add on more rooms to that structure as you go.
Yeah.
I'm envisioning like a shipping container with a yurt on top with cob, starfish going out from. I've got all kinds of crazy things to do in my house.
What makes it appealing to me is that it has a lot of other benefits of another building material that I was actually looking into called SIP. It's I forget what it actually stands for. It's SIP, and it's basically houses made out of a very thick foam. And just like cod, it has zero risk for bugs or fires, and it's also very insulating and can resist high winds and that sort of stuff. But the thing is that it still costs money to make, and so I mean. And
it's manufactured in a factory.
Yeah, it's basically like a prefab. You give them the orders of your building, and then they cut out giant pieces of the foam, basically. So they would cut out the entire wall would be one giant piece of foam, and they would just assemble it at the location. And it's supposed to be put together quickly.
Real fast.
Yeah, but this sounds like it would be cheaper, which is nice because
material-wise, it's way cheaper.
Mm-hmm.
Labor-wise, it's way more expensive.
Mm-hmm.
Because the prefab, you just get the piece and it's done. You connect it to the next piece.
Right.
Whereas cob, you have to either dig up all the clay and sand yourself, or you have to get it shipped and dumped. But then still, you've got to mix it together,
right.
and then you've got to apply it to the wall.
Right.
So it is extremely labor-intensive.
But if you're willing to do it yourself, I mean.
It's healthy, it's fun, it's enjoyable. You can have people help you, as a workshop. You can, train people, provide them with that experience, how to do it themselves. And the thing is that it lasts for thousands of years. So it's like you take care of it properly. What happens is it might take you, let's just say it took a year, which it could be done way faster than that. But let's just say it took a year. Even if it took every day for a whole year, if you were able to build it with $1,000 of materials, and it lasted for 1,000 years. What that means is that you never, ever, ever have to think about a house again. It'd be for the rest of your life, your children's the rest of their life, their children's the rest of their life. Imagine the gift that you would be giving to your children and your grandchildren. They would already have a house.
Well, looking at housing, I mean, one of the things is, it's like, for young people like us, when we want to buy a house, the only houses that people can possibly afford, even if they take financing, is like one of these, stick houses. But already you're getting one that's like 30 years old.
Yeah.
And it's crap to begin with.
You only last 100 years maybe, and it's already 30 years old, the ones that you can afford, and it's like, well, that's stupid.
You have to heat it and air condition it, and it gets bugs and rodents.
Yeah, if you're under 30 and you don't have a house right now, you're getting screwed. And by the system. And even if you already have a house, you're probably still getting screwed.
Oh, totally getting screwed.
Yeah,
totally.
Just because of the way the prices of the house and how hard it is to sell and how hard it is. Everything is harder than it should be.
Wait, but they designed it that way to keep you stuck in the wheel, in the rat system. My parents are, almost, over 55 years old. They're still paying the mortgage on the house that I grew up in. They've been paying the mortgage for, 26 years. They're still paying that mortgage.
Well,
they still haven't paid it off.
People our age, there's a new trap, and that's all. I was just reading, there's a new term, I didn't understand this, but it's called the echo boomers. Apparently, there's like the baby boomers. Well, there's this new term, she doesn't like it, but it's called the echo boomers, okay? But it's basically people describing us, and it's saying on average, we are people our age, and it was scary how accurate it was. Is people our age on average have $30,000 in debt, student loans mostly, and $3,000 in savings.
Right, which means...
And that was pretty much spot on us, because I've got 40,000 student debt, she's got 25, so on average 30 apiece, and we've got about 6,000 in savings, 20, so I was like spot on. I was like, that's creepy.
Right.
But people, and then you see other shows, they call us the ninja generation, the no income, no job, no asset generation. It's just like, so we're looking for alternatives. How can we afford to have a family? How can we afford to have a house? And this is a very exciting alternative that we're interested in, definitely.
Well, you were saying, like, as soon as you saw it, what were you feeling? Like when you were seeing the reality of it?
Well, like I say, we've gone down the road a little bit in that we've looked at alternative housing, like shipping containers. We've looked at yurts, and I've heard of Cobb. Now, we've never seen a Cobb, so I was actually very impressed. I'd heard of Cobb, but actually getting to see the artwork in the video, and but really, like I say, the thing that impressed me the most was the fact that it blows my mind that I could actually learn to build a Cobb house in a week. Like, I still am having a hard time accepting that. But if that's true, if you can learn to build a Cobb house in a week, and then if you have any...
Well, someone like you could easily learn it in a week, because you're already, pretty smart and capable of thinking in those ways.
But the real exciting implications, if you have any artistic inclination, which we do, definitely both of us, she's way more artistic than I am, the possibilities of what you can do with your structure and art. I mean, you could live in a piece of art and build a piece of art, and I mean, you will have something, even if you build one to live in, build one to sell, or to give to someone else. I mean, you would be giving something that would last a long time, and that would be just a piece of culture,
Right, well, I mean, that's the thing, is that it is beautiful, and I love beautiful things. If I'm going to live in something, I would like it to be beautiful, but more importantly, it lasts for thousands of years. Fireproof, earthquake-proof, hurricane-proof, tornado-proof, bug-proof, pest-proof. You don't have to heat it or cool it.
Yeah.
I mean, it's like, hello.
We're very into that. I mean, all the housing options that we look into have I mean, we're interested in that. That's why before we looked at geodesic domes, because they're earthquake-proof, tornado-proof, they're fireproof.
I'm scared of tornadoes.
That's why we looked at SIPs. My wife is terrified of tornadoes, so I think
that's a pretty reasonable fear.
We're only
Around
interested in strong
See,
structures. We don't want a mud house that's going to fall down in an earthquake.
But what's cool about these is that I said I was looking at SIPs. SIPs are made of foam, so they inherently have to be boxes. But this doesn't necessarily.
Any shape you want.
Yeah, and that's cool because I like beauty and beautiful things and art and form also, but I also really like function. And so when you're talking about being able to literally build furniture into your house out of the same material, then suddenly you eliminate the need for furniture. And what does that mean as far as the amount of stuff you have to have? because
You don't have to have anything, essentially.
yeah, you can build the bookcases into the walls. You could theoretically build the cabinets into the walls and
The benches, the seating.
exactly,
all that stuff.
exactly the benches, the seating, tables, potentially, couches easily, and then you can just get like little padding to go on
Pads,
top of
right?
it.
Same thing with the bed. You could have a big bed platform and just.
And we like, the
Yeah.
yurts, we liked how they're circular, but you can't really modify that. But this, you could still have a circle if you wanted to, but you could do so much more.
Well, and a yurt,
Shapes
it's not
of
going to
things.
last for thousands of years.
Yeah.
It's not going to. It's going to be hot in the summer. Most likely.
Yeah.
It's going to be a little cold in the winter, or you're going to have to heat it.
Well, I get really cold really easily, so I would definitely want something that would stay around in the high 70s. So if that means that I would have to have some sort of
Well, if you build the cob building properly, it'll be hotter than that even in the wintertime because it's got the radiant heating, it's got the insulation value, and if you put the windows in the right places, I mean, in a place like this, you're gonna have to open windows even in the wintertime to keep it from being 80 degrees inside.
Mm-hmm.
My
Because
wife likes it like 78 degrees all the time. So
it's 78 too.
she actually likes it 80 probably, so that would be fine.
I don't get hot. My body just doesn't get hot.
She gets cold but not hot. She likes it 80, so that sounds good.
yeah, well, I mean that's the beautiful thing is you can make it as warm or as hot as you want because if you want it colder, you just open the windows,
Yeah.
and if you want it warmer, you just close them all, and then the sun's coming through all the windows. That hot air can't escape.
Mm-hmm.
Because there's no drafts, there's no gaps, there's no thin paper walls. It's like all that heat goes in there, and then because it's got the heating radiant mass, what happens is that all the mass of the building itself absorbs that heat, and then when the sun goes away, that heat radiates into the house. So even though the sun is gone for 12 hours, it's radiating that heat,
Yeah.
and then by the time that heat disappears, it's already sunny again, and it starts heating up again.
In Mississippi, there was one loft I went to that had a stone earthen hearth that seemed like it was similar to Cobbles clay and stuff. And they were saying about how if you put one in the middle of a building, and you can use it to heat up the entire house, and it will heat up the entire house easily because it's earthen. And so then you start thinking, okay, well, if I'm making my whole house out of that, then I can just literally just build that middle furnace into the fire in the middle, you know?
Well, and there's also other amazing techniques that you can do as well, is that you can actually take that fire that's in the middle, and in a well-built cob house, you wouldn't need it, but if you wanted to, you could run tubing through your floors, and you could pump hot water heated by that furnace
Right.
through the floor, and you'd have radiant heating flooring.
That
Or
sounds cozy.
yeah, you could put it in your bed platform, or in the nooks by the window, so you could sit in the windowsill and it'd be like a warm,
A heated bed.
Yeah,
Wow, that sounds impressive.
totally doable. And the thing is that you just do it once,
Mhm.
and for the rest of your entire life, it's done.
Wow.
You never have to think about it again. You just turn it on.
So tell me, are y'all planning on building cob houses here?
We're gonna build earthen buildings, and we'll definitely use cob. We're probably going to do a cob earth bag hybrid.
Okay.
But yeah, we're going to be building a 2-story building,
Okay.
and then we're going to build a smaller one after that.
Cool.
And we'll either start sometime this summer or next spring.
Very cool.
That's exciting. Yeah.
And we're creating what we're calling right now the Golden Program, and one of the facets of the Golden Program is sustainable housing. And what we're going to do is we're creating a book, a video series, and an audio series on the step-by-step process on how to take a piece of land with nothing on it and to have a fully sustainable building.
That jives well for me because that's what I have. I have a piece of unimproved land with nothing on it, and I want to.
Yeah, and that's just one facet.
Yeah.
The other facet
that's
is
exciting.
food production.
Yeah.
We're going to show how to take a piece of land with nothing and establish an ecosystem that provides food 365 days a year.
I'll tell you one of my far out ideas. It probably won't sound so far out to you, but basically, ultimately, in our new global world, the key eventually to global sustainable life for everyone is you have to allocate a piece of land per person, per capita, because you can't just have an exponentially growing population and have no consideration of the environment or how much land per person does it take to grow X amount of food.
Right.
So I really think that, one day in the far, far future, eventually countries are going to have to say, okay, well, for every person born, that person needs an acre or a half acre or quarter acre of land dedicated to them for their food production, and we've gotten so far away from that now. I mean, if you just think about how our country works now, we have all these people living on top of each other, renting. You have maybe one mega corporation owning thousands and thousands of acres of land, and they're overcharging people, but that's not sustainable,
Right.
And so so I think people eventually getting back to having and learning to grow their own garden.
Well, it can't be too far in the future.
Well, yeah, but
Because, I mean, the stats already show that by, 2030, we're almost out of agricultural space to support the food population of the world.
Yeah.
At the rate that we're going now.
When you look at the world, I mean, you see places like England and Japan, which are islands, so they've had to deal with this, where already their population has gotten to a point
Way
where
bigger than...
they can't have more population without, they're kind of confined in that.
But most of their food is imported anyways.
Right, but eventually, what if those places that are exporting it need their food? And I think it's kind of unique here in the New World, I'm calling this the New World, so America, where actually if you look around in America, you see everybody is living on top of each other in the cities, and there actually still are vast tracts of
there's
empty
plenty
land
of land
here in America. And it's not like that in Europe necessarily, or other places where people have just been there for so long that they have everything.
Right.
And so I think, but eventually that's going to change, and America will become like the rest of the world, where all the land's going to be gone, But I think we have a real opportunity here in America
Huge
to actually
opportunity.
get land, start being sustainable, and kind of showing people how it's done that way.
Right. Well, the big block that potentially exists, it doesn't have to exist, is, government regulation.
Mm-hmm.
And it's just really important that we, as the people, realize that this is our land.
Mm-hmm.
It's not the government's land. It's our land.
Well, it's kind of a scary thing. I mean, I've really just recently started really looking into land. I'm really interested in land because, I mean, I come from my family, going back in Mississippi, there were, the evil slave owners had lots of land, had slaves. I mean, I'm not proud of that. But, I come from, my great-great-grandparents were landowners. They were farmers in Mississippi. That's all people did was they farmed. And it's kind of weird because, back in the day, when you have a sustainable piece of land, you have to work the land.
Right.
You have to get out there and you have to hoe the darn thing. And, when people exploit other people, they had slaves to do it for them. But in sustainable living, you have to have your own land. You want to work your own land and be part of that. And be, you have to work for yourself. And, but now what's happened with our system, it's gotten so crazy that with genetic engineering and stuff, now they make crops that are genetically modified to resist Roundup, and that's that big company Monsanto basically has a monopoly over farming. And so basically but all the farmers say in Mississippi, I actually have an uncle who's a farmer, and he uses genetically modified food. I mean, he's not proud of that, I'm not either, but it's because you just spray the crops. You don't have to get out there and hoe, because it kills the weeds, because no one wants to get out there and hoe it themselves, which is very not sustainable. But the future is you got to have land, you got to go out there, you got to hoe it yourself, you got to have a sustainable garden yourself. If you don't, then you just have exploitation. You're either exploiting slaves to work the land, or you're exploiting all the people who don't have land, who are forced to eat your genetically modified food grown from your land that other people have.
Right.
And so if you don't want to be exploited, then you have to own your own land and farm it yourself. And that's what it comes down to eventually.
Right.
So that's why having your own organic garden, having your own house, having your garden and your house integrated together in an artistic manner, I really think that's the future.
Right.
So,
well, we're developing the Golden Program. The Golden Program has a solution to all of those things and more. And one of the key things to look at is that I don't disagree with having your own piece of land, living there with your family and working it all yourself. I personally see the way of the future is small communities, where you get together with either your extended family or people that you really get along with, people that you agree with, people that have the same interests and values as you do, and you all live on the same piece of land, because it's way more efficient to have 100 people have all of their food in one space than to have 100 different people have their own piece of land on a different piece of space. It takes way more energy for 100 people to grow their own food versus 100 people to grow their food together.
Right.
Like, so I'm a really good farmer per se. So if I wanted to, if I dedicated my life to it, I could grow enough food for 100 people, all by myself. If that was my job, if that's what I did every day.
Wow.
And that means that 99 out of 100 people could do something completely different. They wouldn't even have to think about, how am I going to get my food today? It would just always be there. And that means that they could focus on something else, which ideally would benefit me. And if I were in the community, of course it would. Because they'd be grateful that I provided the food, and I'd be grateful that they made all the clothes, or made all the money, or cooked all the food, or whatever it was that they did.
I really like what you're saying, where you're going with that. And, I mean, back in the old days, you'd have communities of people, and usually these communities would be, in the past, in America, would be organized, say, around the church, like everybody in a religion. They'd all help each other, have a barn raiser, build a church or something. And actually, that's what our cities are supposed to be. Groups of people getting together, and then the people are supposed to pull together and say, hey, instead of us all making water, we'll have the city provide us water and electricity and stuff.
Right.
And that's how it's supposed to work. It's just that these cities and corporations and our whole system is just so out of whack, and it's so far away from the individual person that you have no. It's like I'm part of this mega community where I have no community.
Right, exactly. You don't even know who your neighbors are.
So now people, like, what you're talking about is basically like a micro community. You are creating, when you're creating a small community of 10 or 20, 40 people, you're creating a little city, essentially.
Right, a little village,
and you're providing your own services. And so it's just getting down to a level that actually helps people and getting back to the individual focus rather than a mega corporation, hijacking everything from you.
Right.
So, and I'm totally on board with it.
Yeah.
But my only caveat would be to look at the history and try to figure out where did it go wrong with these big cities that we have now, and then try to put in some kind of mechanism where that won't happen to your community as well.
Well, I've already figured out all that as well,
Okay.
and that's in the last part of the Golden Program, which is law.
Okay.
And I'll give you just a real brief, because it's a pretty big thing, but the real brief story is that the United States as we know it was created from the Declaration of Independence.
Right.
And we, as the people, declared that we're all born equal, and we all have the right to pursuit of happiness, and to be, to live our lives as we see fit, as long as we don't harm anybody else. And everything, all governments, all businesses had to honor. They had to. There was no other option. They had to honor those rules. And if they ever did anything that wasn't in honor of those rules, they couldn't exist. They would be shut down, they would be put in jail, they'd be killed. And the whole reason why we did that is because the King of England was, trying to take over our land just like they owned the land in England. So what actually essentially happened is that when we declared our independence, we all became sovereign kings. We weren't citizens. We were sovereign kings of our own domain.
Yeah.
We were dominion over our own land. We made the rules on our land.
And one point to add to what you're saying is all those people who were enfranchised in the Declaration of Independence were all landowners. So these were all people who own land, and they were saying we are sovereign kings of our land that we own.
Right.
But ultimately, the system only works is if each person actually owns some land. If it's a quarter acre per person, you have to have some kind of individual land ownership so people are connected to the earth. It's like, this is my place to live. It's my responsibility to farm this. It's my responsibility to, if I don't farm it, have a community of people to help out.
Right, but back then, you either had your own land or your family had land. That was the only way it was back then, unless you were a slave. Unless you were a slave, you either had your own land or your family had land.
Or like in England, where basically when everyone got disenfranchised, only the king owns everything, so everybody's living on the king land.
The feudal
King's
system.
land working
But
for
that's
them.
why we had the Declaration of Independence, because we didn't want that.
Because you, as an individual, have got to have your own land. You can't be a tenant on the king's land.
Right, or you have no rights.
Just like all the people who are renters in this country, I think having rights ultimately really comes down to having land rights and having this piece of land is mine.
Well, all of that exists, though. It was declared in the Declaration of Independence, and it was secured in the Bill of Rights. The Bill of Rights secured all of those rights for us. But what's happened is that after generation after generation after generation, the banks have gained control. They can't change the Constitution. They can't change the Bill of Rights. They can't change the Declaration of Independence. Only we, the people, can change that. Right? But what they can do is they can influence the people. They can influence the people with their sway and with their power of money. And so what's happened is that there's all sorts of laws that apply to commerce.
I know. I understand what you're saying.
They're
and
doing
that's
everything
totally true.
legally. They're doing everything legally, but what's happening is that the people have forgotten. Like I said, most people in the United States think that they're free. Right? They think that we live in a free country, but you have to ask yourself, if you're not allowed to build whatever you want on your property, if you're not allowed to grow whatever you want on your property, if you're not even allowed to travel in your personal conveyance with a seatbelt or without a seatbelt, is that free? That's not even close. That is a dictatorship. That is slavery.
You're right, and I didn't realize that what you were saying was true until recently. And when that happened was because just this year, just recently, I bought my first piece of land. I didn't own any land. I own a quarter acre land, and I was shocked when I got that land that I couldn't do. I wasn't all these city restrictions. I'm not allowed to have chickens on my land. How am I going to feed myself? I'm allowed to have a garden, but if I want to water my garden, I got to pay the city for the water if I don't get a well. And I want to build a house. I want to build a 900 square foot house. The city says I have to at least build a 1,200 square foot house. What if I want 10 people to live on my land? No, they can't allow it. It's a single family.
Right.
And so I didn't realize how restricted my freedom was until I got that piece of land. And I think a lot of America, what you're saying is they're not awake to this because a lot of Americans are renting. And I really think that until they buy them a 20th of an acre of land, and when they actually try to own a piece of land and understand how not free they are, when they get that piece of land and everyone's telling them what they can't do with it, I think that they will wake up, just like I just recently woke up to everything you're saying. But what really woke me up was getting that piece of land and then realizing they're telling me I can't even survive. I can't live,
Right.
and
You
I
have
can't
to be
feed
slave to the
myself
system.
on this piece of land. So I'm like, I'm a slave. Okay.
Right. Exactly.
And
well, at least you can admit it.
I can admit it now. And the system, you're absolutely right. And you hear these things about wage slaves and things, but there is a new system instead of slavery. There is a new system of slavery, and it is enacted. But as America, it is a business system which they put into place. But as a business consumer, you can choose not to consume their product, and that's essentially what you're selling.
Or be in any private contracts.
Yeah.
You don't have to have any private contracts with those private corporations, with those artificial entities.
But few people are really taking a leadership position like you're doing to actually recognize the system for what it is. It takes a lot of education to understand.
A lot. I
Yeah.
spent thousands of hours weeding through all of the freaking laws and.
Exactly. They make it where you can't understand their laws. And
Yep.
so it takes a lot just to wake up to the fact that there's a problem. And then it takes even more work to actually do something about it. And it really impresses me how far along y'all are at actually doing something about it. So I'm very interested in your golden program and seeing what all you come up with, because y'all are, I was to the point where I've just woken up to the problem and I'm starting to think about what to do about it. But it seems like y'all have been awake to it and y'all are well down the path of doing something about it. And that's very impressive to me.
Yeah.
So I'm very interested in seeing what I can learn from you guys and looking more into your
Texas
golden program. So.
Yeah, they do. Well, and here's the thing, is that our Constitution, our Bill of Rights, our Declaration of Independence, it very clearly gives us the freedom. There can be no mandatory taxes.
Right.
They have to be voluntary taxes. And it's still true. It's still true. Just like it's still true that we can grow whatever we want on our land, and we can build whatever we want on our land. There's laws that say we can't, but they only apply to slaves. They only apply to legal fictions. They don't apply to sovereign, free men and women. But because people have identified with that identity, with that slave, with that artificial self, they're complying with them. The rules exist, but you don't have to comply. And that's the shift that takes place. It's the separation from that artificial entity, that name, that number. All they see is you as a number. You are your social security number.
Absolutely,
That's the only thing they care about. As soon as you realize that you're not a number, you are the authorized representative of that number to use it in whatever way you see fit. You're not the number. All of a sudden, boom, now you can grow whatever you want on your land, you can build whatever you want on your land, and no one can do anything about it. Because the Bill of Rights exists to secure those rights. And that's just as real, just as powerful, and just as true. It's actually way more real, way more powerful, and way more true than any of the statutes and codes that exist.
So to be a sovereign man and to be able to have the, fight back on the system, against the system, and be able to, build whatever you want, grow whatever you want, all that stuff, do you have to be off the grid and not be using any city services then?
Well,
because otherwise, then that you would be participating in their system, and then they would expect taxes.
Well, again, there's a lot of details. There's a ton of details. The most important thing you have to understand is what I just said, which is that the reality does exist, not just in theory, but actually in our Bill of Rights, in our Declaration of Independence, that we have our God-given rights secured for us by the supreme law of this land. The supreme law of this land, which is the Constitution, the Bill of Rights, the Declaration of Independence, secures those rights. And as soon as we understand that, then we can figure out how to apply ourselves in this current system that exists. And like I said, I've spent thousands and thousands of hours researching, reading, talking to people, experimenting, all of that stuff. And I'm creating the Golden Program so that you don't have to do thousands and thousands of hours, because most people won't ever do it. What I'm going to do is make it real easy, real simple. This is the truth. This is a possibility. If you want to exist here, here's the things that are required. Here's the things that are necessary. Here's the steps. Here's the thing, blah, 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 blah. So yeah, it's true that right now you have private contracts with the city, with the government, like a driver's license, for example. Did you actually read all of the terms and conditions that you signed?
So it's actually a contract between you
Actually,
and
I think
the
I
city
did.
or
I don't
something?
remember them, but I actually did.
Well,
You probably didn't you probably didn't comprehend it then, because you're signing away your rights.
really?
As soon as you sign that driver's license, it says in there, you are subject to the statutes and the codes and the jurisdiction of, law enforcement. And you don't have the right to travel between space and time as you see fit. You have to travel between space and time as we say you can. You don't have rights, you have privileges. You turn your rights into privileges as soon as you sign that driver's license. And it's a private contract.
I just got a new license.
Right.
I haven't gotten it in the mail yet.
Right.
Well, I believe you, and let me tell you how far down the journey I've gotten, and it basically what I've discovered kind of corroborates what you're saying, although I haven't spent as much time as you, and that is, I looked into, I have these degrees, okay? Mm-hmm. You look at your degree and it says, okay, well, you got a degree in biochemistry, okay, you have all the rights and privileges belonging to that. And I'm like, okay, well, what right do I actually have with this degree? And so then I got to reading about rights, and then I see when you start a business in this company, your company, you have a corporate person, which is a separate legal entity now, and that separate legal entity has rights. I'm like, okay, well, what rights does a person have? And one of the two main rights, besides like freedom of speech and stuff, one of the big rights of a corporation is the right to have a corporate seal, which lets you have the right to make legally binding contracts. Right. So then it kind of comes around saying, okay, well, as a person, hey, I also have the right to make these contracts. Right. And we've gotten to a point in this country where people don't know how to make contracts. They, feel like you have to have a lawyer to do it. But I believe almost everything you do legally. And the system
separated you from that on purpose. Disempowered you from that on purpose so that you would lose one of the greatest powers we have, which is the right to contract.
Right. So, I understand. So it makes sense to me that probably when you sign up for your driver's license, it is a contract between you and the government, and I'm sure no one actually reads what is actually in that contract and what rights are you giving up. Most people probably don't really know what. I'm still trying to figure out what exactly rights do I have.
Have you seen that?
They made me sign the receipt.
Have you seen that South Park with the terms and conditions from Apple for the iTunes terms and conditions?
I haven't, but I'm sure it's funny.
It's hilarious. But it's a perfect example. When you get the new terms and conditions for your iTunes account, you just click agree. You don't read the 35 pages of terms and conditions. Because even if you did, you wouldn't understand it anyways.
But getting back to that, basically, about to the tax issue, I've tried to look in. They make the tax code so long and complicated. Most people don't look at it. Most people don't understand it. And I've been recently, studying the IRS, which is a department of the Treasury, and how they interact with the Fed, which is a private corporation of bankers, and how they control the whole money system, and how, it's very scary because, as we speak now, possibly in this president's term we have, our country could definitely go. My grandparents lived through a Great Depression, and my grandparents on either side of my family.
Well, this next one's going to be way worse.
They experienced it differently. My Mississippi family, they were on a sustainable farm.
So it didn't affect them much.
The only way the Great Depression hurt my grandmother on my mom's side was that they couldn't afford new Sunday shoes, so she got bunions on her feet. But they didn't hurt for food during the Depression because they lived in the middle of nowhere. Mississippi grew their own stuff. My other grandparents, they had a very rough time through it, and it really shaped their mentality. And so my generation, we kind of resonate more with our grandparents. And my grandparents, when they're dead now on my mother's side, but they kept saying, you guys have seen the good times, but you haven't seen the bad times. And so they've kind of prepared us for this coming depression. What I think is going to be a depression. And so really,
it's going to be worse than the
with
last
the increase in population that we have now versus then, absolutely.
Well,
what's going to be value is
the increase in population and the decrease of sustainability.
Yes, yeah.
50 years ago, 60 years ago, 70 years ago, it was very common that there was local farms and that you even lived or worked on a farm. Now, 99% of all food and all farming is owned by a corporation.
Right.
Which means that, number one, you don't have your own land. Number two, it's not farmland. And number three, you have no idea how to grow food.
And that's really unusual, too. There's this disconnect between people and
it's the
what
only
they
time
eat.
It's the only time it's existed in our awareness of history.
Yeah, I don't know.
In the last 6,000 years.
I don't know what prompted it, but I love cheese, and I wanted to learn how to make cheese, and it's so odd because it's this whole system and process that nobody knows how to do anymore.
And it's so easy too.
And it is, and people, and I tell people that I make cheese, and they go, "Really?" I go,
what's cheese?
Yeah, and they go, "You make
cheese? What is
cheese?
it actually?
How, what?"
Right.
It's this thing that's, and the same thing with making bread too. People have lived off of this stuff for thousands of years, and nobody knows how to make it anymore.
Right, and that's only happened in the last 50, 60 years.
Yeah, and it's not that complicated, but I had to go back and learn. It was almost like rediscovering this ancient art. Because nobody knows how to do it. And, thankfully, there's the internet, and, internet has everything on it about how to do anything. And so that was useful, but, you go and try to find a person that actually does it and actually knows how to do it, and they're few and far between.
Very few.
But ultimately, it comes down to having someone somewhere has to have some land with some cows or goats or something to make the milk to be able to have a sustainable life. You need the livestock or the garden, or at least you need the garden to feed your livestock.
Right. Well, and this is why I'm developing the Golden Program, because knowing how to build your own house, it is great, but it's not enough.
You have to have land to put the house on.
Well, and knowing how to have your own food is great, but it's also not enough. And there's all these aspects that come along. And one of the parts of the Golden Program, besides the food, the housing, and the law, is education. And the education system that we have is extremely influential on who we are and what kind of lives we're living. Everything that we're learning in the education system is taking us further and further and further away from these very simple realities like making cheese and building your own house and growing your own food and having a cow or having a goat or having a chicken. It's taking us further and further away from that. And what is it giving us? Well, it's giving us a piece of paper that and if you actually look at the statistics of people with college degrees and how many of them actually have a job that is that degree, that is in the field of that degree, it's like 20%.
Well, I've like I say, I've been in the education system 9 years. Have lots to do with that, so I understand what our education system teaches and what it doesn't teach. And you're absolutely right. It doesn't teach sustainability. It teaches consumerism. One of the biggest things it doesn't teach, really, where this stuff comes down to a lot, is it doesn't teach the law of rights and land ownership. It doesn't teach accounting. It doesn't teach
how to privately contract.
How to contract, really basic skills that people need.
The most important skills. And on top of that, when you come out of there, even not only do you come out of there with almost nothing, but you're in debt.
Yes.
And then
Yeah.
a lot of people spend the rest of their lives in debt.
And what they do is they call that now having a mortgage without having a house.
Yeah, it's even worse than debt
So because now you have the debt like having a mortgage, but you don't even have the house. So we've got for people, before you might spend that much money on actually having a house, and now you don't even have that. So
Right.
you just have people in debt and they have nothing. They've got
they
no
actually
rent, they got
own
no
nothing.
house.
Right, because you could pay for that house for 20 years, and then you could get hurt, you could get injured, you could get sick, you could lose your job. You miss 2 months rent, and they foreclose on you.
But the scary thing about it, like you say, you're saying that one of the solutions is proper education. People are getting an improper education.
Real education.
But what's even worse than that is we'll call it the improper education that people are getting is basically financially indebting them to where they're just totally, the education is screwing them over because now it's not worth it, the money they spend on that. And young people don't really comprehend the magnitude, the amount of money that they're spending on something that's so valuable because they don't know how to properly value
student loans are
the
the
asset
worst
they're
type of debt to get.
Yeah.
A lot of people will think that a lot of people say that student loans are one of the best types of debt to get because they're as playing with the system. You need a student loan to get a good job and then blah blah blah. It's actually the worst for two reasons. One, because they pawn them off on high school students who they don't train anything about.
Who have no
finance,
idea
have
what
no
it's really
idea.
getting into.
They have no idea about interest, how it works, the finance, the basic financial education on how to evaluate a loan, what a good interest rate is. They have no concept of that. And not only that, but a high school student has no concept of how much money $60,000 really is. They just know that they get $30 a week for an allowance or something.
Well, a lot of people may think, well, I can make $50,000 easy with this job, and I could pay it off in 3 years. But guess what? You spend $45,000 of it just to live, and you get and then you get $5,000 of interest, and then you didn't actually pay off anything.
Yeah, and then the second reason student loans debt is the worst is because it's the only type of loan that can't be dissolved by bankruptcy.
Right.
The only way to get out of student loan debt is if you die. Like literally.
That's the only way you know of.
Yeah.
So
die, and I think if you get
I want to hear what he has to
into
say.
military.
Right. So in the Golden Program, education, housing, law, food production, money is one of the aspects of the Golden Program. And in money, what I do is I show two powerful things. One is, what is the actual reality of the monetary system that we have? And number two, how can you use that to your advantage? And in the Golden Program, what I will show you how to do is to discharge any debt that exists. Any debt. A mortgage, a car, a student loan. Discharge it. Zero.
Nice.
Done.
Well, I'm definitely interested in. I don't understand how to discharge the student loans. I did have a little bit of debt that I've got a credit specialist helping me on, but instead of discharging it, it's like settling it for 20 cents on the dollar or something. Basically getting it at a reduced rate. And we just recently have been learning some real estate investing, and you see with these games that these investors plays with selling notes and selling them at a discount. And so when you realize what they're doing, it's like any debt that you owe, it seems like you should never pay that back because you should be able to settle almost any debt for pennies on the dollar.
Well, it's already been paid. It's already been paid. And see, that's the key thing, is that once you comprehend that it's already been paid, and you can actually see the facts of how it's already been paid, all you have to do is enforce the reality that it's already been paid.
That's interesting. I'm very interested in checking out your Golden Program.
Yeah,
So
it's not completed yet,
Okay.
but every day we're filming,
Mhm.
I'm writing, and we're recording
Mhm.
the step-by-step process of how to do that. And I'm not talking about theory.
Mhm.
I'm not talking about, oh, this could happen, or this is the way it should be, or this is what we should do. I'm talking about what we're actually doing that actually works, that's already happened, that we've already proven, that we have facts, that's already happening. So that's what's going to be so powerful about it.
Well, my question at this point is, how do I become a part of this?
Well, that's really going to be dictated on what you're really ready for, because we're doing it every day. Every day we wake up and we're doing it, and we don't go to sleep until we need to sleep, and then we fall asleep, and then we wake up and we're doing it again. Like, I don't believe in work myself, but if I believed in work, I would have 12 to 16-hour work days, because I don't ever leave the property, almost ever. I don't go to any movies. I don't go to the mall. I don't go to the bar. I don't go to the restaurant. I don't go to parties. All I do every single day is build, film, write, or research the information to build this golden program. I'm doing it every day, all day long, and I'm doing it essentially all by myself.
Well,
and there's a few people, here that are helping with the maintenance and the support and the extra hands of doing those things. But the key foundations, the key elements, all of that stuff, it's just me seeing the vision, figuring out how to get it to work, and then implementing it, recording it, documenting it, writing it, editing it. I mean, it's a huge amount.
Well, you left out
energy.
because I'm good at research and my wife's a video editor, so we might be able to help you a little bit.
Well, video editing is one of the biggest things I need help with because I've probably got about four terabytes of video
Wow.
that I've already recorded for the Golden Program, and it's primo material. It's just not edited yet because I'm filming it. I'm writing the books,
Right.
and editing video, it takes a long time.
Yes, it does.
And so we're way oversaturated, and what I'm doing is I'm just living in faith, and I'm just praying every day that somehow, some way, something's going to
A
happen.
video editor will walk into your house without knowing what she's getting into.
Exactly.
Way to show up.
Yeah, right?
So,
Serendipity at work.
right, so, again, we're doing it every day. We're doing it every single day, and you can help and participate at whatever level you're ready to help and participate at. Every single day we're building. Tomorrow Adam's going to wake up, John's going to wake up, Bard's going to wake up, and they're going to finish that wall that we started building today. And the last 4 days we built that chicken coop and finished that. Every day we're richer than we were before. We have more than we had before. We don't go to some job to get a piece of paper to listen to somebody tell us what to do. We don't pay the taxes. We're not being depleted every day. We're not trying to catch up. We are more powerful, more free, more abundant every single day. And we've got that huge garden out there. We've got tons of seeds that are already sprouted that are basically ready to go into the soil. We've got blueprints and designs for our earthen buildings. We've got blueprints and designs to build hydroponics tilapia tank that is going to be it's like that huge. Did you see that big pool out there?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
We're going to fill it with tilapia. We're going to put a quail cage on the whole top of it, and then we're going to have a greenhouse on the southern side, and the tilapia, of course, will get to eat the tilapia. The quail will feed the quail, and the excess food and the poo from the quail is going to feed the tilapia.
Mm-hmm.
And then the water from the tilapia tank is going to feed the hydroponics greenhouse.
Mm-hmm.
And so we've got that whole closed system.
That's exciting.
It's so efficient, so productive. We're going to have food for, 25 to 50 people just from that closed system thing. And we're talking about a space that anyone who has property has that much space. If you just stop growing grass and mowing it, you could have this on your suburban front lawn.
Wow.
And it would be enough meat, protein, and fat, and vegetables to be able to live on 365 days a year for you and your family.
That's cool.
I'm really
Just like that.
I'm really excited about what you're saying. The only thing that I really kind of have a question about is the tax thing still.
Right.
And that is, it seems to me now, I didn't realize this until just recently, but all these different companies, what's the difference between a C corporation, an S corporation, an LLC, a nonprofit? I saw
They all have it
the
taxed.
Cobb video, they were a land trust nonprofit corporation, they said. And the only difference between these, they were entities set up in order to pay taxes differently to the IRS.
Mm-hmm.
So the question is, if you do not organize as some kind of IRS tax-paying corporation or something, and you're stiff the IRS, these are groups of people who they have guns and they come and they steal your stuff. Right. And how do you deal with that?
Government's scary.
Because literally, they probably won't, but
Right.
if the IRS sends
Well,
our
it's
people
happened
out
to
here
many
and
people.
steal your stuff, I know I've heard
I've
heard about it happening. People, the
It's
IRS.
not uncommon.
So, how are you prepared to deal with that if you're not planning on
Well,
organizing in a company or something.
we're already prepared to deal with that, and what I have is way more powerful than any nonprofit. Nonprofit's a scam. It's a trick. It's not sovereign power. It's a scam and it's a trick. Just like the the Social Security is.
Is there a different type of organization that has some legal standing, or is it just saying I'm not going to pay the IRS?
Nope.
And
The only true freedom is being sovereign. That's the only true freedom.
each individual being sovereign, or is there a way to have a community that's sovereign?
Well, if every person in the community is sovereign, then
Okay.
therefore it's a sovereign community.
So basically, every single person has to be sovereign in the community. Okay.
As long as everyone is on the same page, as long as everyone knows who they really are, and isn't compromising that, then there can be no compromise in the community itself.
And then my question from that is, if everyone's sovereign in the community, which sovereign person owns all the land in the commune, and is that divided up, or can you get shares
Well,
in it?
you know,
Or
that
how
has
does that work?
that has to be dependent on each community. I mean, when you have a sovereign community, you get to make up your own rules.
Right.
Every sovereign community is going to have rules, but they are rules that are made up by the king or by the people, the body of that community, and everyone that's there is agreeing to it. It's not that there's not rules, it's just that there's full disclosure,
Mhm.
there's mutual consideration, all the elements of a bona fide contract exist.
Mhm.
And everyone that's in there is participating in that private contract. So if you start your own community, you get to make whatever rules you want. And the only people that are going to want to be there are ones that like those rules.
Mhm.
And the people that don't like those rules won't be there. So if you're a vegan and you want to have rules about being a vegan, well, people that eat meat aren't going to come to your community.
But when
But
you,
people that are vegan are going to like that.
But when you start this community, I mean, if someone wants to join the community, you basically give them a contract and say, here are the rules, here's the contract, sign it, don't sign it, that
Yeah.
kind of thing. You actually have to
If you were-
have something like that,
Yeah,
right?
if you wanted to actually be a part of this community in the sense that you lived here and this was your place that you dwelt, then yes, we would have to have a private contract for all of our benefits, so that we know exactly what the truth is, what the real agreements is. There can be no scamming, there can be no trickery, there can be no irresponsibility, because you have to know you're liable to that contract. Which is good on all of our parts, because we don't want any irresponsibility. We don't want any non-liability. We only want responsible and liable people, because you can't be sovereign without liability.
Mhm.
Until you're fully liable for your actions, you are not sovereign.
Mhm.
And people talk about freedom, but really it's responsibility that gives us that freedom.
Mhm.
Without true responsibility, we cannot have true freedom. So, if and when that actually became something that was of real interest for you, we would have to look at what those terms and conditions would be, so that we could all see if it's something that we all felt that was going to be in our mutual benefit.
Well,
And if it was, then there would be no problem. It would be beneficial.
that might be something we'll interest in the long run. In the short run, I'm kind of interested in being sort of like, I don't know if it could be like an affiliate, just come by and volunteer some
You can
time or
borrow him
something,
during the
or-
week, but I get him on the weekend.
Yeah, what if I just want to come over and help y'all build or something?
Right.
I'm sure
Yeah.
he'll take free labor.
Yeah, totally. Well, as far as that goes, we've got all sorts of different opportunities. We have workshops and we have retreats, but people can come to those specific things. We also have work trade programs, and if you wanted to go more intimate than that, because those are more like for the general public. If you wanted to be more intimate than that, we would have to make some sort of agreement. What is it that you want, and what are you willing to offer for what you want? Because obviously there's certain
Right.
things that you want specifically, like you want to know how to grow whatever you want on your property, no matter what the city says.
Or
You
how
want
to have a goat farm.
you want to know how to have goats on your property, no matter what the city says. You want to know how to build whatever you want. You want to know how to not have to pay taxes. You want to know these certain things, and I have all that information. And if you're actually ready for that information, I can easily share that information. And your way to get that information is either one, wait for the golden program to be finished. 2 is hire me as a consultant. Or 3 is trade for that information.
Mhm.
Those are the 3 options.
Cool. Yeah.
So-
So in the short run, I'd come to the free public events that y'all have,
Mhm.
and then beyond that, I probably will be interested in trading or something. Even if it's just my labor, come out here and help you guys.
Yeah.
So we can talk about that more in the future. But it
Would
does
be
sound
good
like something
exercise,
that
too.
I'm interested in.
Yeah. Oh, it's great exercise.
Yeah. He's looking for exercise.
As far as your golden rule thing goes, no, I don't want to wait till your golden rule
Golden
thing
program.
is. Golden program is. I'm sorry, golden rule. That's a totally different thing.
Totally different.
Sorry. Your golden program. I don't want to wait till that's done because I possibly might be interested in helping you finish it faster.
Great.
So
Great.
it's like why wait for the cob house to be built when you can help someone build theirs?
Right. Well, and that's part of what we're doing is that we're actually reestablishing what's basically been forgotten, which is kinship, which is community, which is actually meeting someone as an individual and saying, hey, we've got common interest, we've got common values, and we could actually help each other get to that place faster than we can get there by ourselves. And we've gotten into a very separated and individualized culture where we don't know who our neighbors are, and if we do, we don't know what they're doing with their day. And even if they're growing, they go to the grocery store every day, but then we go to the grocery store too. So they drive to the grocery store, we drive to the grocery store, and there's 20 people in the same neighborhood that drive to the exact same grocery store on the same day, versus one person that could just take everyone's. I mean, it would be so easy now with technology. Everyone's got their iPad or their iPhone. Everyone just has their grocery list. You put it in, and it gets sent into a neighborhood grocery list. It's got a name, and it's got a list of items, and all those list of items get compiled, and then those list of items have a quantity price to them, and then that one person goes to the grocery store, they buy everything, they bring it back, everyone comes, and instead of going to the grocery store, they just walk to the neighbor's house, they pick up all the food, they pay for it, and then they've gone. They've just saved 10 hours of people's time, because only one person drove the 10 minutes, stood in line, went through all the aisles, versus 100 people going to the grocery store, standing in line, blah, 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 blah. I mean, do you see how easy and efficient it could be? Same thing. In a suburban neighborhood, 95% of everyone in that suburban neighborhood is going to have a lawnmower. Because 95% of people in a suburban neighborhood have a lawn. And if you live in a suburban neighborhood, you have to mow it, otherwise you get fined and cited. So unless you pay someone to mow it, which a lot of people do.
What you're saying is so relevant to my life right now, because like that piece of land I was telling you about, now the grass is getting high. And let me tell you, I don't want to be dependent on oil to mow my grass. And so I actually went in Fort Worth, they have this antique thing, and I actually found this antique flea market, and I found this old-timey push mower. And if you have the time, like I do right now, because I don't have a job, I can go out there. I want to get the push mower, and with my own labor, I can just mow that myself when I get that. And so that's actually. But then I'm thinking, okay, but I need a shed to store it in. So I'm like, okay, I got to put a shed on my land. If I put a shed on my land, do they reclassify it as being unimproved and being improved? So there's all this like crazy stuff that is going through my mind right now related to mowing my lawn. I'm like, okay, do I pay someone to do it? But that's But really, to get sustainable, I love how the old mowers don't rely on oil. You sharpen them, you oil them.
Yeah,
you got a little time. I mean, you can mow your grass.
You don't have to clean the filter. You don't have to change the oil. You don't have to change the spark plugs. You don't have to blow the engine. You don't have to spend all the money to maintain it and buy it and fix it. I mean, it's like. And
that's, I don't know why, but that's very appealing to me, is to get an old timey mower and do it myself. I guess there's something about mowing the lawn myself. Y'all probably understand. Maybe not everyone else would. But,
Yeah, I mean, I can see both sides of it. The simplicity, the sustainability of it is far superior in every single way compared to a mechanical lawnmower. With that being said, if you have a big lawn,
yeah.
Right, and you have a big lawnmower, it saves you a lot of time. And if you make a decent amount of money, then it actually is way more cost effective to pay for the maintenance, pay for the oil, pay for the investment of the thing itself to save you the amount of time it would take to mow the lawn.
Yeah.
So I can see both sides of it, but the real truth is that even despite that time savings, we have gotten into a reality that's totally unsustainable, which is lawns to begin with. Why do we even have lawns? For the most part, we don't need to have lawns, especially not the type of lawns that people have nowadays. We could be having a garden instead.
Tending a garden instead of tending grass, yeah.
Right. I mean, people are paying for the lawnmower. They're spending the time to mow. They're paying for the water to water it. Maybe fertilizers, to keep the grass green. And it doesn't produce anything. Produces them nothing. So it's time and money for nothing. Whereas if you have... Whereas if you have a garden, I can actually show people how to establish a garden. And once it's established, besides harvesting time, you would spend just as much time tending to the garden as you would tending to the lawn. And it would be cheaper than the lawn would, and it would produce. It would provide you something that would save you $5, $10, $15, $20,000 a year, depending on how much you spend on produce.
I'll tell you what, in the short run, you guys think about what kind of terms and conditions y'all be interested in on having me come out here certain hours and helping y'all, or what kind of stuff you'd want out of me. I mean, I definitely would have a lot to trade as far as my time. I could help out, transportation, I have a car, I could drive around. Knowledge as far as more the research type area, I can do a lot of that. But think about it and let me know when you want me to come back as far as just a public event, or if there's some other time, or if there's some certain time frames that are acceptable for me to come out and help or something.
Okay, have you sent us an email yet?
No,
I questions right now.
I found out about.
You can answer some of those questions right now.
I found out about the event at 7:30 tonight.
Oh, cool.
Yeah, so we're
Glad you came.
Yeah, no, it was very last minute. I found it on Meetup.
We're very into
I was looking for-
spontaneity, and I'm very lucky to have a wife who comes up with really awesome things for me to do.
You're welcome.
So as my event planner, she has
Well,
really
you guys
taken-
are lucky to have a relationship that you actually enjoy.
Yeah.
Well, yeah, the people who
enjoy
don't have relationships with their spouse, they don't enjoy it. I mean, that's sad. I mean,
It's common, though. Extremely common.
you know, we just saw. I have a friend.
Only there's times, I like them more than others.
Yeah, of course.
So.
I have a friend who's Indian. Well, she Indian. She just married a Chinese guy, and we went to her wedding, and she had so much cultural baggage. I mean, she had like 3 ceremonies: her traditional Indian ceremony, they're also Catholic, her Catholic ceremony, and there's all this. You know, in India, they've had thousands of years to.
Yeah, I've been to India.
And whenever you have a sustainable, well, I don't want to use a different type of sustainable culture. Whenever you have a civilization that's lasted a long time, invariably it happens and it turns into like a feudal society where marriage starts becoming used as a tool to control land and wealth. And when that starts happening, so all our Indian families like, oh, you're marrying beneath you have to marry a certain person, and so it's not about love or being with somebody that you care about. And everybody who buys into that sort of system, and some people forced into it because if they come from a rich family, like, oh, we're going to disown you if you go marry the commoner, But in America, we have more of a free thinking society where it's more common to marry for love or to be in a happy relationship. But
well, I mean, in one sense it is because it's not so based on money. But in another sense, I mean, if you look at the divorce rate that exists, it's very high.
no, it's like 50% or something.
Yeah, it's over 50%. And if you actually look at the people that are married, I would say 50% of those people that are married
Are unhappy or something.
are only happy for the first couple of years. And after that, if they don't get a divorce, they nag at each other, they complain, they don't spend time together. I mean, that's extremely common. That's way more common than people that are married and are like, they go to sleep, cuddling. They, wake up and give each other a kiss and spend their day together. I mean, most couples, one of them at least works and is gone all day long. And, most couples have their TV shows that they watch at night or their friends that they go out with. The amount of time that most couples actually spend together when they're married is a very small amount. Very small amount.
Well, it's interesting. It really, in this culture where both people have to work to support the family, then they don't have any time to spend together.
I know.
We've had the fortunate...
And you're all stressed from working all the time.
We've been fortunate that
So
last year
relationship
I
sucks.
worked, she didn't work, and we were able to make it work. Right now she's working, I'm not working, we're able to make it work. But I wonder, if we were both working at the same time, we might also have those same issues.
It would be different.
And so
Yeah, because you'd be stressed and...
when you're in a situation where both people have to work and you're worried about your money, and then both people are gone, no one's there to, if you have a kid, take care of the kid, and so it's like everybody suffers if the economic situation gets too bad.
Yeah.
And
Insane, man.
and back in the old days in America, if just the guy worked and he made enough money to support both of them, but now it's not necessarily like that unless you change things. But it doesn't work as a cohesive family unit to have both people working at the same time when you have a family, and then you're hiring someone to take care of your kid all day while you're working, and it just you don't have time to train your
it's
kid.
simple things too. Like
You're like-
if both people are working until 5 p.m., then who cooks dinner?
right? And so,
Give me some pharmaceuticals now.
and that's the basic stress that the average American is under. And I mean, can you imagine?
Tough life, man.
And so, you know, I mean, this sustainable lifestyle is,
It's getting very messy.
I mean, it's needed. I mean, I think it's going to happen. It's very going to be appealing to Americans when it will catch on. It'll especially catch on really fast when the next depression happens and people are going to be looking for food.
Well, and ideally, this golden program can be done before that happens, and ideally, we can start saving some people before that happens. Because once it happens, if you're in a city, you're dead in 2 weeks.
Yeah.
Because if
All food's gonna be gone.
all food's gone, and you either die of starvation or because someone kills you for what you have. I mean, have you ever seen people in a mob? Have you ever seen like?
Scary.
Yeah, you can go on YouTube and you can look like there's a video of this mob of people in Walmart. And Walmart had a special sale where like there was this one item that was like 99 cents that was normally like $6, and there was only a certain amount of them. Well, the whole freaking store was full of these people wanting this 99 cents item, and it ran out. And people started like taking and stealing the ones that were other people had already gotten. Like people were getting trampled and like injured.
Well,
Because of $5. And that's not even, they're not even out of food yet.
Yeah.
I mean, can you imagine what people would be like if they have no food?
well, recently I've become also interested in studying history, and one of the things that really is interesting to me is, you know, Germany, the Weimar Republic, right before World War II. After World War I, they had all this debt, and basically people who had worked, and then their overnight, well, I don't know if it was overnight, but their entire savings, and there's a story about this lady who has a whole wheelbarrow full of money to buy a loaf of bread. She goes outside, and someone stole her wheelbarrow and left all the cash because of the hyperinflation.
Yeah,
And
the wheelbarrow was worth way more than the cash.
But
People burned it as fuel.
right now, I mean, I've been paying attention enough to know that our Federal Reserve is basically printing money ridiculous, and it is a possibility that
It's a
we
guarantee.
that we could have. Well, we're already having inflation, but I mean, what if we have hyperinflation here too?
It's
I
a
mean,
guarantee. It is a guarantee.
and if that happens, what you're talking about could very well happen.
It will happen.
So
It will happen, and the question is which people are going to be ready? Because I am 99% sure that there's not going to be a revolution until it happens. Because until there's crises, people are too complacent.
Yeah.
And we don't have 10 years. We don't have 20 years. We're talking 1 year to 3 years max.
are we still recording?
Probably.
Okay. Well, I was gonna turn it off before I start telling you my crazy theories, but if you want them on recording, I can tell you.
As long as you're fine with me challenging them.
That's fine. I was talking at the wedding that I went to recently to my friend about my gut says that there is maybe a 10% chance of what would happen if that happened. What if we had hyperinflation? You're saying it's guaranteed. Okay, well, what if it does happen? What if we have hyperinflation? What if we have this huge national debt? What if the U.S. dollar becomes worthless overnight? What if you're the state of Texas? What are your options? Well, one of those options might not be the best option, but one of those options actually is to succeed and actually print your own currency. Succeed, if I said that right. Texas, and basically,
Lone Star State.
I analyze it, and fortunately, actually, I think Texas is going to be okay no matter what happens because we have our own energy, we have our own energy grid as a state. We have a history of independence,
Farmland.
a history of farmland, farming, gun ownership, things that Texans are going to be fine. So
Well,
we're very,
a lot of them will be.
we're very
if you
lucky.
If you're talking about Dallas,
yeah, maybe not in the city, but people will have to leave the city and go to the farmland. People like me, I'm lucky because I have family that live in the middle of nowhere in Mississippi that
Yeah,
have
you just
a
go
farm,
there, yeah.
and I would just go there. And if I didn't have somewhere else to go, I could go live with my grandma, and if I starved to death, she's got pecan trees. I'll eat that. She's got fig trees. I'll eat some figs.
right? You're not going to
You
starve.
know?
You may not have your Twinkies, but you're not going to starve.
Right, and that's how people in my family got through the last depression. Is you flee to the country and you have to make food.
How old are the fig trees?
Well, she has some. My grandmother is amazing. I mean, she's a real landowner. She's got probably 500 acres of land combined, inherited from either side of her family.
Awesome.
Which, I mean, this land originally, her ancestors a lot of people farmed by the Mississippi River, and then they moved east to like the hills in Mississippi, and then the low west, that fertile soil. I talked about that, the most fertile soil in the world. Because there's like one place in China that has this fertile there, and the Mississippi Delta area blows over there, but the soil is like 20 feet deep by the river, but it's only like 5 feet deep out in the hills where they moved to. And so then they had to learn crop rotation, because if you didn't rotate the crop there, then it would get depleted. But originally her family, way back when, moved out there to farm. And I forgot where I was going with that. But anyway.
How old are the fig trees?
Yes.
But that land, that they've been out there. She has a barn that was built like 1826 or something. And it's still there.
She
it's
has
made
one of the
log
oldest
cabins.
pecan trees in the state.
She has what we
Over 100
think
years.
is the oldest pecan tree in the state of Mississippi. It's gigantic, and she actually knows the date. When
How
it was,
tall is it? Do you know?
it's huge.
What about the fig trees? Are they huge too?
She has a big fig tree. I mean, I don't know how big for a fig tree. It's smaller than this room, but it's maybe
Okay,
half
so
the
it's
size.
not that big. Yeah.
Yeah.
Just depends on the variety. How
Um,
big they can get.
so I don't know how old the fig tree is, but her pecan tree is really old. And so I'm fortunate that I have that family history, but not everyone has that. But they have a history of land ownership and that kind of stuff. And so anyway,
So your crazy theory
my
is...
crazy theory is that there's a 10% chance that if hyperinflation happens, that Texas will actually say, screw this, we're going to be our own country again. I don't know whether that's true or not, but I would give it probabilistically a 10% chance. So that was my question to my friend was, do you agree? I mean, do you say, it's higher, it's lower probability? It's hard to deny that it's at least a 5% chance. I mean, if we're going to have hyperinflation, if the U.S. dollar goes to nothing, it is an option for Texas to say, screw this, we'll just print our own currency. Mm-hmm. And you can't do that unless you're your own country, but if really things went bad,
Right.
it's possible. So,
right.
And if that happens, I mean, it's scary. It's scary because in 1865, I mean, my family, they went through the Civil War. They remember that stuff. It was like yesterday to them. But here, people aren't used to that. But I would give it a 5% chance that we could have a civil war in this country in the next 50 years. Not even kidding. And even if it's only a 5% chance, that's kind of scary.
I would say that there's a bigger chance than that.
Especially
right now with the government trying to take the gun rights.
If there's a 10% chance that we could have a civil war in the next 30 years, that's kind of scary. How do you deal with that? I mean, definitely you want to start growing your own food and start learning your rights, start studying history.
Learning your rights.
Yep. And so I think it's really going to wake people up. People are going to have to become more responsible citizens. I mean, our generation, we grew up with my father's generation, they basically, they didn't have the same experiences as my grandparents' generation who went to World War II, lived through the Great Depression, so they're just kind of different. And like I say, I mean, it's not a bad thing. I mean, my father is very into, I just want to go off and do whatever I want to do, and so he never really had a career, which isn't a bad thing. He's recently just moved off to Florida. And I'm like, Dad, why are you going to Florida? What if we have kids? Don't you want to be near your grandkids? And he's just not thinking about that. He wants to go race horses in Florida, which is, it's just their generation can be a little different. But for my generation, we're looking at the reality. The ground situation is we don't have a house. We got massive student debt. We're not certain where our food's going to come from.
Hyperinflation is a year to 3 years away.
Hyperinflation is a big possibility. What are we going to do about this?
Right.
And so we're looking to do something about it.
Well, the most important thing that we can do is two things. One is we can secure our land. Two is that we can educate the people. Because here's the thing, is that unless you live out in the middle of nowhere, if and when that hyperinflation happens, there's going to be mobs of people that come onto your land because you have stuff, and no one else has it. And if people will injure and harm people for $5 on a sale item, they will do it for food when they're starving. And unless you've got a freaking barbed wire fence and guard dogs and a tower with people with guns in it, people are going to come onto your property. You may have the food, but they're going to take your food.
And that's what's scary, because I'm a very nonviolent person, but at the same time I've had to study this and say, okay, well, I really have to support gun rights. What would you do if someone is going to come on your farm and steal all your food in a mob situation? I mean,
yeah, what do you do? Exactly. And I'm not saying necessarily to, give that any energy, but what I am saying is that you have to be able to look at likely possibilities, and you have to be able to feel that you're covered and that you're prepared. And if you're not, then you need to ask yourself, okay, well, what can I do? You either need to move somewhere else, or you need to prepare. And if you don't do that, then you're going to be one of the people that when that hyperinflation hits, you don't.
Have you heard of preppers?
Uh-huh.
The word prepper, yeah. We resonate a little bit with preppers, I think. We're like, yeah, get ready, you know. You know what's interesting? It's not common in this country, but people from other cultures. Like, my stepmother is Chinese, and she joined a thing called Falun Gong. I never heard of them. But anyway, one of their teachings is that you should have a year's supply of food. This is really important. And what's also weird is people who lived through World War II from different cultures. My wife's family, some of them were, they were Dutch or something. I forget it was
Danish.
Anyway, I heard a story from her mom that she told me. I think your grandmother maybe was also had that same mentality. Like she could never have enough food, and your mom was telling me how she always had to have a pantry stuffed with food because these people who've lived through wars or turmoil, they're like, we've got to have like a year's supply of food just there. So if anything happens, we're covered with food, and that's a real fear that a lot of people in the world.
Well, I don't think it should be a fear. I think it should be a confidence.
People in the U.S. don't have that fear, but a lot of people from other cultures who live through these events do have that fear. And a result of that is they store up food like crazy. And, you know, as an American citizen, I never felt that fear. I was like, I can always get food.
Just go to
not a problem.
local store.
But now you're thinking, okay, but in Houston, we lived in Houston, you know, and Houston, Texas, where they have hurricane problems. So we lived there through the hurricane. So we saw it happen when a hurricane comes through. When everybody flees, everybody runs north on the freeway, they run out of gas. When grocery stores run out of food, ice, everything in a day.
I have a funny story about that. Okay, so we were
So
we were in Mississippi.
And that's small compared to hyperinflation.
Yeah, so we were in Mississippi, and there was I don't even remember what hurricane it was, but there was a minor hurricane
Katrina
that
or
hit,
Ike or something.
No, that hit the coast of Mississippi. And everybody in Vicksburg was nervous, and so they were all going to the stores and getting water and buying bread and everything. And the stores are out, and people are posting on Facebook and that sort of stuff. And I was like, I'm not worried about it. I got a bread machine. It's like I got a water filter. I've got a pitcher that filters water. So here's my 2-gallon milk jug. I'm just gonna fill it up. I don't have to pay for this.
People are buying batteries. We have one of those shake flashlights, so we can just.
I actually have a old timey railroad lantern that burns kerosene or something, and people are like, I have to go and stock up on batteries. I'm like, I already have an oil lantern, and I had bought it just for decoration, but I checked it out and it still worked, and I bought a new wick, and it's like I was like, okay, well, does anybody need me to bake them bread? And that sort of stuff. Because these people have no concept of this. They're like, oh shit, Kroger's out of bread. And I'm like, okay, well, I got a machine.
So we've taken a few steps down the path. I'm just saying what you're offering to us, it sounds like, is actually a few more steps down the path. And I think we probably...
Many more steps.
We're
it's a
very...
whole new paradigm.
Well, for most people, but for us, we're maybe at least a quarter into that paradigm. So it feels like a natural progression for us to maybe take the next step.
Yeah.
And we're very interested in your golden program and learning more about sustainable living. And
well, this is as important as it gets, man. And
so
like I said, we need to prepare ourselves and we need to educate the people, because if we don't educate the people, we're going to have millions of people that don't have food, that are desperate, that are starving, and will do desperate and crazy things.
Well, I'm very interested in education too, but half the battle is trying to educate myself, because
You can't educate anyone else until you educate yourself. It's like when you ask a teacher a question, he can only give you the answers he's aware of. He can't give you the answer he doesn't have.
And what you're talking about doing, there's a few people who've kind of gone down that road. One person that we really admire is, have you heard of Robert Kiyosaki? He's a real estate guy, but basically he is fed up with the education system. I'm reading a book by him right now called Increase Your Financial Intelligence. He was really interested in education, complained about how the school system doesn't teach people financial intelligence. So he basically created his own board game called Cash Flow, which we have, which teaches people,
I know that.
Teaches people kind of accounting and finance through a game format, and then he has books and stuff. But I think the way that you're going is to have videos, write books, maybe make a game. Any way that can connect with people to educate them kind of outside the normal school system.
Well,
or even just have websites, or all these things that you're doing is necessary now in the information age, just to make the information available.
Our only hope really is YouTube, is Facebook, is Twitter, is the social networking realities. Because, like I said, I've already got terabytes of video, but even if it were all edited, there's only going to be a few hundred people that will actually watch it.
Yeah.
Whereas if all of a sudden people were to realize that this information is important, millions of people would watch it because it's already there. And all you have to do is tell your friend, hey, look at this link. And then they tell their friend, hey, look at this link. And you post it on your Facebook and 300 people see it. And then they post it on their Facebook and 400 people see it. And they post it on their Facebook and 3,000 people see it. And then all of a sudden, just like
Viral.
that. And that, right, the viral is the only hope. If I had to go door to door and tell people, hey, you know, think about this, think about this, think about this, it would never happen.
Right.
Whereas with this, I can prepare all the content ahead of time, make it all available to the people, and then as soon as someone is actually looking for the information, they're going to find it. And as soon as someone finds the information, they're going to share it. Because this golden program is, I'm telling you, it's way beyond anything I've ever heard of or ever seen. Because even like this game you're talking about, which is potentially way better than what we're getting in the school system, it's still what I call old paradigm. Because what he's talking about is how to utilize the current monetary system with the rules that are in place.
Yeah, he wasn't.
I'm talking about how to completely,
Circumvent.
just completely make your own rules essentially and use it the way you want to use it.
Yeah, Kiyosaki was saying he's not really political. He was just mostly interested in figuring out what the rules were so he could play the game. But he wasn't interested in trying to change the game because he didn't think he could. So I don't know if you're talking about trying to change the game or actually just understanding the rules so you can play the game in a different way. I'm not sure which way you're talking about.
Both.
Yeah.
Both, because as soon as you understand the rules, and a lot of people understand the rules, the game has to change. Because the game is set up so that only a few people know the rules.
So
And that's why the global elite are rich and everyone else is poor, because they know the rules and everyone else doesn't. And it only works because only they know the rules and everyone else doesn't. As soon as everyone else knew the rules, it wouldn't work anymore. It would have to die, and a whole new thing would be born. And the reality is that it was already figured out when we had our Bill of Rights, when we had our Declaration of Independence, a long time ago. They very specifically put in there, only Congress has the right to print and dictate the value of money. Well, the Federal Reserve is a private corporation. It's treason. And it's not operating under the Bill of Rights.
Well,
it's operating under private contract rules.
Yeah, I haven't read it to the future, but I assume that the Fed has a contract with Congress.
They
authorizes them to do that.
Well, they do, but it's a void. It's void ab initio because it doesn't comply with the supreme law of the land.
Okay.
And anything that doesn't comply with the supreme law of the land is void ab initio.
And it's supposed to be our Supreme Court that would supposed to nullify that. But
It's supposed to, right?
They're not doing their job, I guess.
Well, because we're not enforcing it.
Right.
We're not making them do it. Because even the Supreme Court can be corrupt. It's way less corrupt than the lower courts, but it can still be corrupt. And if we don't know that it's corrupt, if we don't know how to hold it accountable, then how does it get held accountable? I mean, it's like, I don't know how much research you've done, but 9/11, for example.
I've heard a little bit about that. I can tell you, I mean, the thing with the Supreme Court is they have a lifetime appointment, and they get appointed by the president. So if the president is corrupt, the person they appoint is going to be corrupt, and then, and then hopefully during their life tenure, they'll get a conscience and start being not corrupt halfway through. You hope, but it was very disturbing to me. I think when we had I'm not all into affirmative action, but we did have like 1 or 2 female Supreme Court justices, and then I think Bush. I think if I remember what happened correctly, feigned like he was going to appoint a woman, but he picked a totally incompetent woman, and then they didn't appoint her, and then he appointed a white male to it. It was like, we need some more women on the Supreme Court. And I think during his term, he actually got rid of one and changed her out for a guy, which isn't a bad thing. It's just that there's like 8 guys and 1 woman on there, So that was kind of an indication to me when that happened that, maybe our Supreme Court needs a little work.
Well, it's been broken for a long time because the Federal Reserve has existed since 1933.
I thought I just read that something happened in 1913.
The island.
I'm not sure. Anyway, the makings of them came around 1913. I don't know if they actually didn't come around until 1933.
Meeting of the island, right?
Talking about Jekyll Island?
Yes.
I think so. I think I just read something by Kiyosaki, something about them coming around 1913ish, but in that area. But one thing I just learned recently, I don't know if it's true or not, but he was talking about how the system of money has changed. And one important date I didn't realize was 1971. He's saying in 1971, I was like, what happened in 1971? That's such a big deal. But he says in 1971, when Nixon took us off the gold standard. And that was after, because see, I thought an important date would be like 1964, 65.
We got taken off the gold standard
Well, see,
before that.
he said, well, you saw the coins used to be silver in 1964, and in 1965, there were no more silver coins. Because, you can see silver quarters up to 1964, 65, there's no silver quarters.
Right.
So they got rid of that. But according to Kiyosaki, and I haven't done all the research for yet, but he says we weren't actually completely off the gold standard until 1971, and that Nixon did it. I'll have to look into that and see if that's true. But he said when that happened, that fundamentally changed the way the money system works, and we didn't have money, now we have a currency.
Well, right.
And
We don't have money.
Yeah, he says
People call it money, but we don't have money.
and he's calling it a currency now.
Right, it's a fiat currency. It's not just
Right.
a currency, but it's a fiat currency. And we used to have like a $20 bill. It used to say on the $20 bill, an IOU for gold.
Right.
You can take this to the bank in exchange for gold.
I actually have a dollar bill that, for I don't know what year, but it is actually a silver certificate. You can change this dollar bill in for a silver dollar at a
Right.
bank. I actually have 2 of those.
Right.
So-
That and look at the date on that.
Yeah.
That was real money.
Yeah.
As soon as it didn't say exchangeable for gold, it became a currency.
So anyway, he
And
says
as soon as the Federal Reserve came into play, it became a fiat currency.
one thing he told me that kind of blew my mind that I just learned this week was that right now you see the stock market is rising. And I'm reading this book by Kiyosaki. I'm reading is his old one. He has a newer one. I'm reading one from 2008, which is still kind of relevant because there was a crash in 2007. But he's saying the stock market rising right now isn't so much that the value of the assets is going up. It's just inflation, and when inflation
Exactly.
happens, the price of everything goes up. So it's like a feel-good feeling. Everyone's like, "Oh, look, the stocks are going up," but it's not. The stocks are really going up. It's that inflation is happening.
Right. Right. And that's why you have to look at real value.
And that's scary.
So, the further back you go, the more you'll see the truth of this. But in the past 99 years, since the Federal Reserve came into play, the value of the U.S. dollar has dropped 1% every year.
Mhm.
So the U.S. dollar is actually 99% less value now than 99 years ago. That's a fact.
Yeah.
You can find the graph on the chart that exists that shows the value of the U.S. dollar 99 years ago and the value of the U.S. dollar now. And it's 99% less value. And you can look at it in a more realistic term without graphs and charts. All you have to do is ask yourself, okay, how many gallons of milk does a dollar buy now? And how many gallons of milk did a dollar buy back then?
No, you're right. That's just inflation. And I mean, Kiyosaki was saying when he was a kid, like in the 80s or something, you could get an ounce of gold for like $70. And now it's like, it was up like 1900, now it's like 1300 or something. But just by looking at the price of gold, you can see how far the price of the dollar has gone down. But he's saying that all currencies tend to zero over time. And so
They all hit rock bottom.
So you have
Then you
to
hit
cycle it, and you
hyperinflation.
have to change the currency in for assets that appreciate, like land or gold or silver or bitcoins or something.
Right.
We almost went to a Bitcoin thing tonight. I'm glad we didn't go. It came here instead. But have you heard of bitcoins?
Oh yeah,
I actually have a friend.
it's
that
pretty cool.
I actually have 5 of them, which I got through a fluke because when we were living in Mississippi, I had a computer science friend who was just totally into bitcoins, and he actually gave us 5 bitcoins. So I have 5 bitcoins. I'm like, oh my gosh, these are worth what, $500 now? Really? How do I trade them in? I haven't figured that out yet, but I have some bitcoins, and it is kind of interesting because they are rare because they use computer time to make them because you have to get a new number or something, and their servers only allow to go up to like 20 million bitcoins, and only like 15 million of them have been found. And so it's interesting, and already I've seen that there's an international demand for them because there was some country in South America where their currency was worthless, and so they were trying to put their money in anything of value, and one of the things they were buying in the portfolio were bitcoins. They're like, wow, this computer guy just made up this new currency, and people in other countries are already buying into it. Wow, that's impressive,
Oh yeah, it's every single week it's becoming better and better and better and better and better. Because every single week, all the civilized countries are doing the exact same thing we're doing. Because they're all run by the exact same people. Australia, Europe, and the United States, Canada, even a lot of places in South America, like Argentina, they're all using fiat currencies. And they're all just printing and inflating their currency to zero. And what's happening is that if you actually look, you can look at the facts. The most recent one was Cyprus, and in Cyprus they passed these laws which automatically tax anybody that has over $100,000 income an extra 10% tax on what they have, like that.
Those people are just going to move away as fast as they can.
Well, and then they put a limit on how much you're allowed to withdraw from the bank at a time. So you can't pull out your money when you want to. You can only pull out little bits at a time. All sorts of highly regulatory things like that. And they're doing that. I mean, they're doing that all over the place. And there's all like Greece, for example. Their currency totally collapsed. Italy is real close right now to having a complete and total collapse.
Do you want to hear another one of my harebrained theories? It's not harebrained, but this is the actual possibility of what could happen. But I've heard just stuff I've read and things and what my gut is telling me, that essentially there's a possibility that the international bankers who control things eventually want a world currency. And the way that they're going to get everyone to switch to this world currency is they're going to have it backed up by gold. Because, hey, who wants to use their fiat currencies if now all of a sudden, look, there's this new world currency that's backed up by gold? That's going to be the new thing. And everybody's going to trade their money for that, right? That's how everybody's going to switch to it. But in order for that to happen, the price of gold, when that happens, is going to have to go up to like $5,000 an ounce.
Right.
And so before that happens, what's going to happen is the price of gold, the international bankers who control a lot of the gold reserves of the country, and actually the U.S. has the highest gold reserve. I just saw think about this, how actually it was the U.S. and then Germany and then Italy.
Well, they have the alleged highest reserve.
Alleged highest reserve. But anyway, but the idea is that they have to force the price of gold to go down. They've got to buy up all the gold they can.
That's what they're doing right now.
Unless they've already done that. And
they're doing that right now.
And
that's
that
why
could
it
be,
just dropped.
And that's what's kind of scary, because this could be happening right now. If this is true, and this actually could be right now the feint, where they order their country, Cyprus, who had like one of the top 10 gold reserves, because Cyprus is a little island next to Italy.
There's no coincidence that Cyprus' economy just totally collapsed, and they did what they just did. If you research Cyprus online, you can see all the stuff that just happened, what they just did, and simultaneously, the world market value of gold also just dropped. There's no coincidence that those two things are happening simultaneously.
This could be it, but anyway, what I predict, or is a possibility at least, is that the bankers ordered Cyprus to do that, lower the price of gold. They're going to buy as much gold as they can while it's low. Then, the price of gold next, we're going to have the crash. Price of gold is going to skyrocket, and then they're going to
have it all.
They're going to have it all, and then they're going to introduce their international currency, which is backed up by gold.
Right.
Is that true or not? I don't know, but it's possible, and it seems to jive with what seems to be going on. So
I guarantee you, whether it actually works or not is a less percentage. But I would say that I'm 95% sure that very close to that theory is being implemented, meaning they are moving towards and trying to do that. Whether it actually succeeds or not, we'll see. It's a less chance that it will succeed because there's all sorts of factors that could potentially get in the way. But they're definitely moving towards a reality. I mean, they've been preparing for a long time for what they call the one world order. I mean, if you start looking, you can spend thousands of hours just researching the one world order.
I've looked into it a little bit, and we just recently read about the Rothschilds and how essentially there was this one Jewish family who controlled banking, and they sent their kids all around around the world.
All about them.
And so, are these the people who control the world?
Well, even the Rothschilds are still pawns.
I don't know who they're pawns to. I don't know who the real person controlling the world is, but that person, is very interesting. What is the New World Order? What is their plan?
Well, it's to have a world government. A world military, a world government, a world currency, a world bank.
Well, if that's it, they're going to do it financial through this world bank, and that could be happening pretty soon, actually.
Oh, yeah. That's why all the economies are collapsing, because as soon as they all collapse, what's everyone going to want? A solution. That's how they got Look, there's no coincidence about the Depression and the Federal Reserve. The Federal Reserve came into being because they promised to fix the Depression. They created the Great Depression so that they could integrate the Federal Reserve.
Yeah.
And they're about to do the same thing right now, except for on a world scale. Cyprus, Argentina, United States, Italy, Greece, Australia, most of the European countries, their currency is just becoming worthless. And it's all happening simultaneously. It's all planned many years ago. It's all strategized many years ago, and it's all planned.
Well, one thing how this ties back into what you're doing is that's one more step farther away from the person. You know, so now you got this global government, and then you got your national government, and then you got your state and local government, and then you got your city government, and finally you have your community and then your micro community of people trying to live sustainably. But people have got to get back to
But you
that.
won't be able to, once the world government takes effect, you won't be able to do that.
You won't be able to have your micro community.
No, you won't, because they'll have a law that says you can't. And we won't have, once a world government exists, our Constitution won't exist.
Yeah.
They'll just get rid of it.
Well, the thing is, it's okay to have a world government, but that world government has to come up to our level. We can't go down to it. So if the world government is going to accept our Constitution or have a better Constitution, that's fine. If they're going to have a worse or not have a Constitution, that's not fine. So it's not that I personally am against a world government. If we want to have a world government with a great Constitution, that's great.
Right, but that's not part of the plan.
Well, that's not part of their plan, but see, other people can influence the plan. Because if enough people, especially if the world government depends on sovereign people from the U.S. joining that to sign off on it.
They don't depend on that. All they need, they just need a certain mass. And right now, the United States is a critical tipping point because we're the only country left in the entire world that has gun rights.
Really?
Yeah.
I know that South Korea doesn't.
Oh no, none of them do.
Nowhere has it? Really? I know
Nope.
Canadians.
It's all. It has to all be licensed.
Really?
You know, you can have guns, but it has to be licensed and regulated. In the United States, you can still have guns without a license.
Well, learning Texas history, when I was young, my grandfather really suggested, my Texas grandfather, I have a Mississippi family in Texas, I'm a Texasipian, but my Texan grandfather really said, you need to study Texas history. And I really didn't do that until just recently. I just started doing it. But it was fascinating to me. I was reading about how Santa Ana, Mexico, came to Texas and said, surrender your guns. And they said, screw it, no, and they fought to keep their gun rights. So Texans really have an amazing history of saying, you know what, we're not giving up our guns. And so if this global government happens and if that's their plan, I don't really think Texas is going to do it without a fight.
Well, they
And
won't, but the Texas will have no chance against the global government, the global military.
Yeah, but like I say,
Texas has no chance against the global military.
But the U.S. does. So no one's going to attack Texas without attacking the whole U.S.
But that's exactly why they're trying to, as a U.S. nation, get rid of the gun rights. Because until they do, they can't do it.
You just gave me a scary idea. They can't destroy the U.S. until they separate Texas from the rest of the U.S. So it could actually be part of the global government plan to have a civil war in the U.S., separate Texas military from the rest of the country in order to take it over. Because combined, I don't think they can win against the U.S. If they can divide the U.S. with a civil war, they can. And
divide and conquer.
And so what I have to do now, based on this very fruitful conversation, is I have to increase the probability of civil war to 15%. I'm serious. You have convinced me that my estimate was too low. I think it's at least 15% now that there could be a civil war in the next 30 years. That's scary. What do you think? Am I just crazy, or you know?
Oh no, I mean, well, number one, I believe anything is possible, including miracles, including supernatural realities, including multidimensional realities. So to me, anything is possible. Now, when you're talking percentages and likelihoods based on our time-space continuum, I would say that 15% is very, very doable. I mean, I would say potentially.
So that's interesting. That makes me think about it. So maybe actually preserving the Union might be top priority for America in the next 30 years.
And the only way that's going to happen is through education. We have to remind people that the Constitution was written by the people, for the people. See, the reality is that the way it actually goes is you have God, the Creator, the universe, the life energy itself. Then you have man, the product of that life energy. Then you have the government, created by the man. We were created by life itself, right? We created the government, and then the government has the government employees. So if you look at a police officer or even a judge, they're under the government, which is under the people. They're 2 stages below me. Now, if you're a slave, it is you, and then the government officials, and then the government, which is actually 2 strings ahead of you, 2 strings above you. So what we have to do is we have to re-educate or remind people of the real truth, which is actually we are the supreme power. The supreme law is created by us for us, and the government officials are the servants to uphold and protect that supreme law which we created. That's what we have to remember. And so what that means is that unless we want to give away our rights, they can't be taken. Which means that unless we want to be told what we can grow and what we can build, then we can't be told. Unless we want to be told that, we can't be told that. Unless we agree to it, it can't be enforced.
I like it. I like re-educating or educating Americans to understand how America works, or is supposed to work, preserving the Union, getting those ideas, to make sure that America is a real force to when this new world order happens, because it will happen, that they actually have a constitution and are modeled more like after the U.S. with the Declaration of Independence, so we don't have to give up our rights in order to join it. We have it guaranteed to the world. I can get on board with that, and I think America is the only chance that that's going to happen.
We are the only chance.
Yeah.
We're the
because
only
if it's not
chance.
us, it's going to be modeled after the rest of the world.
Right, which is no constitution,
Yeah.
which is government rule over the people.
Yeah. I like it, man. That's cool.
Yeah.
Good conversation. I haven't had a conversation that good in a long time, so I really appreciate it.
We've been in Mississippi. There has been a lack of stimulating conversation there.
That's not true.
Have you
Mississippians-
ever had a conversation with information at that level?
Yeah, I don't want you to
No,
touch
not
that.
really. I mean, to lower extents, yes. And my wife is
so
very
to lower extents, which is no.
my yeah, that's true. My
I'm
wife
not, I'm
is
not trying to devalue anybody, or
Yeah.
I'm just trying. Let's just be really honest.
Yeah.
That you, and including everyone you know, doesn't actually talk at this level.
yeah, you're right.
Because if you did, your life would be completely different.
I'll tell you one thing though. I have met and come across a group of people who talk nearly that level, and this group of a really interesting group of people.
But how are they living?
They're living
As sovereign men and women?
maybe. Actually, they might be.
I want to know what you were going to say about me. You starting to say my life.
Okay, I'll come back to that. There's a group that we joined called CEO Space International, and what these people are, especially run by a really amazing guy who essentially they teach entrepreneurship.
Uh-huh.
So, and a lot of entrepreneurship comes around to understanding your rights, being a sovereign person, making your own sovereign business, and it's similar, and basically empowering people to wealth and things like that. It's different, but similar enough, and a lot of those people are
Right,
actually into sustainable living and stuff. A lot of those people there actually had alternative living and things. So it's not the
But
same.
unless they're aware that they can do anything that they want on their land, without any dictator, without any authority saying otherwise, unless they're aware that the currency system right now is a fiat currency, which is actually treason,
they're aware of
unless
that, I think.
unless they're aware of that, and unless they're living in reflection of that awareness, then all they're doing is speaking words. It's like when you go to school, they're just blabbing blah 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 blah, and there's nothing there. It's just words being blabbed.
I'll tell you though that some of those people do meet those qualifications, which is interesting. So
I mean that's rare.
Not to devalue. I mean, and these people are rare. They're very interesting, but we actually do. We do know some people like that.
The founder
Good.
of the whole foundation of the education that CEO Space provides, or at least a paradigm of the education, is about differentiating what they call competitive capitalism, which is the current system, versus cooperative capitalism. And so they try to teach people how to cooperate.
So the guy who runs this thing, he's a retired investment banker, and so he's really more into the financial aspect of it, and also into the really the entrepreneurial part of it. But a lot of people who go there, he basically creates a free market and empowers people that way. It's different. It's similar. Some of the people do meet the criteria that you're talking about.
Yeah.
I've definitely never had a conversation that good with any of them. So, yeah, that was deep, man. Big you. But I also don't want you to get too cocky and thinking that there's no one else out there like that. There are actually some
Well, where do you think I got a lot of my information?
I don't know.
That's be teacher somewhere.
You probably taught yourself a lot of it, but you probably
But I did a lot of research.
need
Yeah.
I did a lot of research, and what that means is that I had to question, obviously, most of the information that we find, and I also had to listen to information from other people that were giving that information and be like, be able to differentiate the difference, because the reality is that not only do I know that I'm not the only one that has this information, but all you have to do is go to your Constitution of the United States. All you have to do is go to the Declaration of Independence, the Bill of Rights. I mean, it's all right there. It's not hard to find. What's hard is to get over the conditioning. It's not that the information doesn't exist. It's
Right.
that we're so conditioned, brainwashed, manipulated into this way of life. We don't even question it. We don't even think about it. We don't even read the own Constitution of our own country, the supreme law of the land. How many people know what the Constitution says? How many people know what the Bill of Rights say? How many people know what the Declaration of Independence says? And how many people actually know what it means?
Well, I tell you, we're lucky here in Texas, and we are different than a lot of the rest of the nation. And I've seen it here in Texas. I mean, in Houston, that was the district for Ron Paul. He's always talking about the Constitution. There is this whole libertarian movement. There are people who really into the Constitution. So there are some Americans who actually do read the Constitution, know what the Constitution says. They know how screwed the system is. They're trying to look for solutions for it. But what's fascinating is having lived in Mississippi and now being back in Texas and looking at the difference in mentality of Texas versus other states. And by other states, I'm going to lump all the other states together and put Mississippi as the worst one, but also the most interesting one. Worst in a positive way. My wife differentiates. But what's fascinating about it is the difference in the histories. Texas was a winner. They kept their gun rights. The Civil War was not lost on Texas soil. It was lost otherwise. And they went on, they beat Mexico. We have a history of this Americanism, constitutionalism, all this stuff going on in Texas. In Mississippi, they fought, they lost. They got forced by the government to do against their will. And they're still dealing with that. And so those people live in fear, in a sense.
Right, a suppressed culture.
They're suppressed that if they act up, the government's going to come punish them. New World Order is just going to come and send their army and punish them. And they feel powerless, whereas the Texans feel empowered.
Right.
Texans say, you know what, our history, come on Santa Ana, we got the Alamo, try to take our guns, you know.
Yeah.
And so it's a different and a more positive, more American culture here in Texas than a lot of the rest of the country, because not all the states, there's only a few states that are really truly sovereign still.
Right.
Texas may not be 100% sovereign, but maybe California, Texas, and New York, and you can argue that no state is sovereign, but on the sovereign scale, Texas is up there at the highest.
Well, it just depends, because all the states, including Texas, have been incorporated.
Yeah, so they're not really sovereign,
But
but in the sense of having our own.
the
yeah.
Constitution, the Bill of Rights, it still exists.
Yes.
And what that means is that at any point in time, I, as a sovereign man, can claim my rights, and whether I have given them up or not, at any point in time, I can claim them. And so we, as an individual, and also we as a state, and also we as a country, can claim them. Mm-hmm. And again, it comes down to education, because obviously, I mean, I don't even need to make a video to tell people the truth. All you have to do is come here, and you'll see the fact that I grow whatever I want, even though the city specifically says I can't.
Mm-hmm.
I build whatever I want, even though the city specifically says that I can't. I don't pay any mandatory taxes. I only pay voluntary taxes.
Yeah, I was recently reading about income tax and how it's voluntary and how it was.
It is.
Yeah.
It is. And here's what's hilarious is that you actually fill out an application. You're actually applying to pay taxes.
Yeah.
It's not mandatory.
And so it's like a mandatory voluntary tax, and so they're trying to make it.
It is voluntary, but people have been brainwashed and conditioned to believe that it's mandatory. And that's one of the sayings is the best slaves are the ones that think they're free.
And so recently I've gotten into trying to understand that, and a personal goal of mine is I would like to read the whole tax code myself. I mean, that's going to take forever probably. But fortunately, we're in the internet age. You can Google search and go through it faster to the relevant points.
Yeah, if you wanted to do it, I commend you for it. But I can tell you, after my many thousands of hours of research, it's not worth it.
It's not worth it.
You don't need it. What you do need is to understand the difference between the tax code and the Bill of Rights.
Okay.
And what you need to understand is what is the difference between a sovereign man and woman, and a citizen.
Really?
Because sovereigns are not citizens.
Really?
No.
Huh.
If you're a citizen, that means you are a part of a greater power. You're under the wing, you're under the protection, you're under the governance, the rule of the kingdom, of the state, of the country, of whatever that is. You could call yourself a sovereign citizen, but it's what do they call the thing? It's like a jumbo shrimp.
It's fascinating. What you're basically proposing to me is that there's a subset of law that I don't understand.
Exactly. And that's the law that you need to understand. Not the tax law. You need to understand the supreme law.
Right. And you're proposing to me that the supreme law is actually the actual law in the United States.
It's the supreme law of the land.
And that is fascinating to me because that is definitely something that's not taught in school. If that's
on purpose.
But if that's true, I mean, that's fascinating. That almost makes me want to, like, I don't even, do they even teach that in law school? Do lawyers do that?
No. Well, did you know that it's, so you don't need a license to practice law.
Yeah. I assume that, but I don't know how to actually do it.
Right. Well, what you do need is a license to be an attorney.
Ah, yeah, okay.
Well, guess what? If you're an attorney, you take what's called the bar exam. It's British law. It's not even American law. It's British law.
Wow.
And that's how you know for a fact that the whole system of what we call law is treason. It's void ab initio. It has nothing to do with the supreme law. It has nothing to do with it. It's the complete opposite. And it's been weaseled in. It's been integrated in. And people actually think it's law now, but it's not law. So you don't need a license to practice law. And in fact, all the attorneys, they're not practicing American law. They're practicing British law. And they are subject to the crown. They're subject to the crown, and the bar, it's just an association. It has no standing in law. It's just a group. It's like being part of a yacht club.
So when you
pay your dues, and you're part of the club.
So
That's it.
When you work through that system, are you basically somewhere along the way, signing some contract that you elect to be governed by British law or something? I mean,
yeah, of
how
course.
does that work?
Of course.
And where does that point come in time where you're actually saying, I want to be governed by British law? I mean, where is that?
There's probably no contract that you've signed that actually says that, but as soon as you agree to be a part of, it's like when you sign a driver's license, for example.
Okay.
You're agreeing to be subject to commercial code. And commercial code is essentially what British law is. It's the law of the sea. They call it maritime law.
So do you have a Texas driver's license? No. How do you get around? Or can you get around? Or can you get around and cop
I'm a sovereign man. I get to do whatever I want.
So when a cop asks for your driver's license, what do you do?
I don't have a driver's license. I can show you what I do have.
And then what do they do? And what do you show them? I mean, do they send you to jail and then you get out of jail for that? Or what happens?
I haven't been sent to jail for it yet.
Do the cops roll their eyes at you? I mean, what do you show them? I mean, what happens? I mean, I'm fascinated. I'm just wondering how this plays out in actual living it,
Well, before you leave, you should definitely take a look at my personal conveyance out there. I do not have a license plate. I don't have registration.
Is it a car?
Well,
Kinda?
I don't call it a car.
Oh, okay.
Because, so here's the thing, is that, do you even know what a car is?
Legal definition is probably not. I don't know.
Right, you don't know what a car is.
So it's a non-car car, sort of.
It's my personal conveyance.
Personal convenience.
It's completely different. And I'll tell you what a car is because you need to know. A car is a motor vehicle for the use and purpose of commerce.
Ah, okay.
And so you're in commercial jurisdiction. And you're subject to commercial law.
Right.
As soon as you say you're driving a car, you're arrested. You're fined. You're ticketed. You have no power.
That's fascinating, man.
And
That's
so
so fascinating.
Right, they try to, they'll try to get me into their jurisdiction, but as long as I don't agree to any of their terms,
No, seriously.
then I'm not under their jurisdiction.
I'm very interested in some education from you. So think about what I need to trade, what I need to do. I'd be happy to come out here and help. Whatever. Let's work it out. I'm totally fascinated, not only by your lifestyle, but also by your intelligence and your research that you've done and your understanding of the U.S. system, which I am very
Right. Well,
curious
like
about.
you said, don't get cocky, and I'm always happy to be challenged at that. I'm always happy to be held accountable to that, and I don't believe that I am the most intelligent person in the whole world. What I know for a fact is that I am more free, more empowered, more healthy, and living more abundantly than 99.99% of everyone on Earth.
Yeah, I want to get up there too. And it's so fascinating because, I mean, we look at it on paper, and my wife and I, on paper, when you compare ourselves to the global world, I mean, we're in the, 1% of wealth, probably.
Right.
But, and yet here, it's like, well, if we're so wealthy, why is our life not so great here,
Right, and that's why I didn't say that's why I didn't say I'm, the 0.001% of wealth. I said I'm the 0.001% of empowerment,
Right.
freedom, health, and abundance.
Mm-hmm.
I have way more food than 99.99% of people on Earth.
Yeah.
I have way more free time than 99.99% of people on Earth. Even all the children. I have way more free time than all the children do. I'm healthier. I've only been sick one day in 13 years. That includes a cold, a fever, a flu.
My wife has asthma, just so you know, so that's why she's
Well,
sneezing.
I have no allergies.
I do.
Correct. Because you have a bad immune system. Because you were probably immunized. You were probably born in a hospital. You've probably taken antibiotics. I don't take any antibiotics. I take no pharmaceuticals. I've never been to a doctor. These are facts. Those are realities. I have a six-pack.
Where were
I don't
you
ever
born?
work out at a gym.
You weren't born in a hospital? Were you? Cool.
Baby, it's late.
That's not something we have control over generally, but yeah.
Yeah, it's not, because our parents do. And
Yeah.
generally speaking, we don't have control over our life, because even if we're born at home,
It's like midnight.
Oh, I have to get her to bed because
she's got to work.
she actually has to work.
Well, no, not tomorrow, but...
Oh, she don't. Hey, it's Saturday.
Yeah, it's Saturday, but I'm tired anyways. I woke up early.
Oh, we have a very pressing date with a computer game called Borderlands 2 that we got to play later.
Oh, we're not playing it tonight, baby.
Well,
It's
tomorrow.
midnight.
I know. You gotta get your rest so you can play with me tomorrow. Computer games are fascinating. I only, grew up in my generation, so.
Yeah,
Yeah,
they're
well,
video
you
games.
got a little taste, man.
All right. Well, thanks, man. So when can I come back?